Most people think money problems end when income reaches a certain level, when bills are paid easily, when life feels stable and predictable. But what if that moment never actually arrives? What if the idea of having enough money is not a solution, but an illusion that quietly keeps people stuck? Hello, I'm Max, and if this content helps you better understand how money works in real life, I invite you to leave a like and subscribe. Here, we explore finances calmly and with perspective. Now, let's talk about the idea of having enough money, and why it often fails to deliver what people expect. The phrase, enough money, sounds logical. It suggests a finish line. Once you reach it, effort can slow, attention can relax, and financial worry should disappear. Yet for many people, reaching that point does not bring the relief they imagined. Income increases, but anxiety remains. Expenses adjust. Expectations shift. What once felt sufficient quietly becomes normal. This is the first part of the lie. Enough is rarely a fixed number. It is a moving target shaped by lifestyle, environment, and habits. As income grows, comfort expands. What was once optional becomes standard. What felt like abundance becomes maintenance. Without intentional boundaries, money adapts to consumption faster than it creates security. Another part of the lie is the assumption that money alone creates stability. Income provides capacity, but stability comes from structure. Without systems, saving, margins, flexibility, higher income simply supports higher commitments. More money flowing in does not automatically mean more control. In many cases, it means more responsibility, more pressure, and more dependency on continued income. The idea of enough also hides a behavioral shift. When people believe they have reached sufficiency, attention fades. Spending is less examined. Habits go unchecked. Decisions are made for ease rather than alignment. Comfort increases, but awareness decreases. Over time, this quiet trade-off weakens financial resilience. There is also a psychological layer. Having enough money often becomes a justification. It justifies convenience. It justifies upgrades. It justifies not reviewing patterns that once mattered. The mindset shifts from building to maintaining, from intentional growth to passive continuation. This feels safe, but it slowly narrows options. Social context reinforces this illusion. When peers reach similar income levels, the shared baseline rises. Spending feels reasonable because it is common. Comparison shifts upward. Enough is no longer defined by security, but by alignment with surroundings. This makes restraint feel unnecessary and simplicity feel restrictive, even when long-term goals are quietly drifting. Importantly, this does not mean money is irrelevant. It means money alone is incomplete. Financial freedom is not created by reaching a number, but by building flexibility. Flexibility comes from margins, low fixed costs, and the ability to adapt when conditions change. Without these, enough money only works as long as nothing changes. The lie persists because it is subtle. Life feels fine. Bills are paid. Stress is manageable. There is no clear signal that something is wrong. Yet beneath the surface, progress slows. Optionality shrinks. Dependence on current income increases. The system works, but it becomes fragile. Understanding this reframes the goal. The objective is not to reach enough money, but to create enough control. Control over expenses. Control over time. Control over future choices. When control exists, income becomes a tool rather than a requirement. Without it, even high income can feel insufficient. This is where the real work begins. Not in chasing a number, but in questioning what enough actually means. When examined carefully, the idea of having enough money transforms from a destination into a process built on awareness, structure, and intentional decisions that quietly support long-term stability. Once the idea of enough money settles in, it begins to influence behavior in subtle ways. The pressure to improve fades, urgency softens, financial decisions become less intentional, not because people stop caring, but because they believe the most difficult part is behind them. This shift is quiet, and that is why it is rarely noticed. One of the first changes appears in how expenses are treated. When money feels sufficient, spending no longer feels like a decision that needs attention. Costs are accepted rather than questioned. Small increases feel harmless. Fixed expenses slowly expand, not dramatically, but steadily. Over time, what once felt like flexibility turns into obligation. The margin that created a sense of safety begins to narrow, even though income remains strong. Another effect is psychological. Enough money creates a false sense of arrival. The mind relaxes, assuming stability is permanent. Planning becomes less frequent. Reviewing habits feels unnecessary. This does not lead to reckless behavior, but to passive continuation. Financial life moves forward on autopilot, repeating patterns that no longer serve long-term goals. This is where the lie becomes more visible. Having enough money does not protect against poor structure. Without clear systems, higher income simply supports a more expensive version of the same habits. Comfort increases, but control does not. When circumstances change, the lack of structure is exposed, often at the worst possible moment. Time also plays a role. When life feels financially comfortable, the future feels distant. Long-term thinking loses emotional weight. Decisions are optimized for the present, because the present feels secure. Savings goals are postponed. Flexibility is assumed rather than built. This delay quietly compounds, reducing the power of time to work in your favor. Social influence reinforces this mindset. When peers operate at similar income levels, spending patterns converge. What everyone does feels normal. Enough is defined by comparison rather than preparedness. This makes restraint feel unnecessary and simplicity feel like regression, even when long-term stability would benefit from it. Another overlooked aspect is adaptability. When money replaces effort consistently, skills erode. Problem solving is outsourced. Costs increase, not because of excess, but because alternatives are no longer practiced. The ability to adjust quickly, reduce expenses, or pivot when needed weakens. This makes future challenges more expensive and stressful to navigate. Emotionally, having enough reduces feedback. Stress is low. There are no obvious warning signs. Everything appears functional. Yet beneath the surface, dependence on continued income grows. Financial life becomes fragile, not due to lack of money, but due to lack of margin and flexibility. The most dangerous part of this lie is that it feels reasonable. Nothing looks wrong. Life works. This is why many people do not realize the cost until options are already limited. Progress did not stop suddenly. It slowed quietly, disguised as stability. The alternative is not fear or deprivation. It is awareness. Enough money should not signal the end of attention, but the beginning of refinement. It is the moment to strengthen structure, rebuild margins, and align behavior with long-term priorities. When income increases, intentionality must increase with it. Real security does not come from reaching a number. It comes from building a system that remains stable under change. Enough money, without control, is temporary. Control, even with modest income, creates durability. This is the second truth. The lie is not that money matters. The lie is that money alone is enough. Without structure, awareness, and adaptability, having enough money quietly delays the work that actually creates lasting financial stability. As the illusion of enough money continues, its impact becomes more structural than emotional. At this stage, financial life feels organized and predictable. Systems appear to work. Bills are paid on time. Income covers expenses comfortably. Yet this sense of order often hides a deeper imbalance: stability without resilience. One of the most important misunderstandings is equating comfort with preparedness. Comfort reflects current conditions. Preparedness reflects future uncertainty. When income is steady, it is easy to assume that tomorrow will look like today. This assumption quietly shapes decisions. Buffers feel optional. Flexibility feels unnecessary. Planning becomes lighter, because nothing seems urgent. Another subtle shift occurs in how risk is perceived. With enough money, risk is often avoided, not because it is dangerous, but because it disrupts routine. Changes that could improve long-term outcomes are postponed if they introduce discomfort. The priority becomes preserving what works now, even if it limits future potential. Over time, this mindset trades growth for predictability. Structure also begins to drift. When money feels sufficient, systems are less likely to be reviewed or improved. Savings rates stagnate. Investment habits become passive. Expenses grow more complex. The system still functions, but efficiency declines. Without regular adjustment, small inefficiencies compound into meaningful limitations. There is also a cognitive effect. Enough money reduces reflection. Decisions feel settled. Choices are justified by current success. This reduces curiosity and experimentation. Financial life becomes less adaptive and more rigid. The ability to respond creatively to change weakens, increasing reliance on stable conditions. Social influence continues to reinforce the illusion. When peers share similar lifestyles, spending feels validated. Enough is defined by shared behavior rather than by personal goals or resilience. This external reference point quietly shifts expectations upward, making restraint feel unnecessary and simplicity feel like a step backward. Another important consequence is dependency. When a lifestyle is built around the assumption of stable income, options narrow. Fixed costs increase, flexibility decreases. The system works only as long as income remains unchanged. This dependency is rarely acknowledged, because it feels like success. Yet dependence on continuity is the opposite of freedom. Emotionally, this stage feels calm. There is little stress, little urgency, and few signals to change. That calmness is precisely what makes the illusion persistent. Without friction, there is no prompt to reevaluate. Financial life continues forward, not by intention, but by inertia. Breaking this pattern does not require drastic change. It requires reintroducing awareness. Comfort must be separated from control. Enough money should be seen as a resource, not a conclusion. It is an opportunity to strengthen systems, increase margins, and expand optionality, not to disengage. The real shift happens when questions return. What happens if income changes? How flexible are expenses? How quickly can adjustments be made? How much choice exists without sacrificing stability? These questions transform enough money from a passive state into an active advantage. This is the deeper truth. Having enough money is not the end of the journey. It is the moment when the quality of decisions matters most. Without intention, enough becomes fragile. With structure and awareness, it becomes powerful. The difference is not income, but how consciously it is used. The transition from having enough money to achieving real financial stability is subtle, not dramatic. It does not require a sudden increase in income or extreme lifestyle changes. Instead, it begins with a shift in how money is viewed. Enough money is a condition. Stability is a system. At this stage, the goal is no longer comfort, but resilience. Resilience means the ability to absorb change without losing direction. It is built by widening margins, not by maximizing lifestyle. This is where intention replaces inertia. The first adjustment is redefining what safety actually means. Safety is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of options. Options come from low fixed costs, adaptable spending, and resources that are not fully committed. When money is treated as fully allocated the moment it arrives, stability remains fragile. Next comes structural clarity. Stable finances rely on simple, visible systems. Cash flow should be easy to understand at a glance. Savings and investments should follow clear rules, not emotional impulses. Complexity often feels sophisticated, but simplicity is what allows control during uncertainty. Another key element is deliberate friction. Real stability accepts small, controlled discomfort to prevent large future disruptions. This may mean maintaining higher savings than feels necessary, delaying upgrades that are affordable but reduce flexibility, or choosing consistency over optimization. These decisions feel conservative in the moment, but they compound into freedom. Time also becomes a central factor. Enough money often focuses on the present. Stability extends perspective. Decisions are evaluated not only by current comfort, but by how they affect future optionality. This long view changes priorities. Short-term pleasure loses influence when it competes with long-term autonomy. Importantly, stability does not eliminate enjoyment. It reframes it. Enjoyment becomes intentional rather than automatic. Experiences are chosen deliberately, without the pressure to signal success or match external expectations. This reduces financial noise and strengthens alignment between spending and values. Another shift is psychological. When systems are strong, confidence no longer depends on income. There is less anxiety around fluctuations, fewer reactive decisions, and more patience. Financial life feels quieter, not because there is more money, but because decisions are grounded. Stability also restores agency. Instead of reacting to circumstances, choices are made from a position of control. Work becomes optional earlier. Negotiation power increases. Opportunities can be evaluated calmly rather than urgently. This is the practical benefit of resilience. The final transformation is recognizing that stability is ongoing. It is not a milestone that, once reached, can be ignored. Systems must be reviewed, adjusted, and simplified over time. The environment changes. Personal goals evolve. Stability adapts. In contrast to the illusion of enough money, real financial stability does not announce itself. It feels almost boring. There are fewer dramatic moments, fewer emotional swings, and fewer visible signals. But beneath that calm surface is strength. The series ends with this idea: enough money is comfortable, but comfort is fragile when left unattended. Stability is built intentionally, maintained quietly, and revealed only when conditions change. That is when the difference becomes clear. The greatest advantage in personal finance is not high income, perfect timing, or superior knowledge. It is the ability to remain calm, flexible, and deliberate over long periods of time. This advantage is quiet, rarely visible, and often misunderstood. Most people spend years chasing financial comfort. They optimize for ease, predictability, and short-term relief. Bills are paid, routines are stable, and life feels manageable. From the outside, nothing appears wrong. But comfort, when left unexamined, gradually narrows options. It locks decisions into patterns that are difficult to change. The alternative is not discomfort for its own sake. It is intentional structure. Structure creates space between income and lifestyle, between desire and action, between opportunity and obligation. That space is where control lives. Real financial progress begins when money stops being used primarily to maintain a feeling and starts being used to build capability. Capability means choice. Choice means freedom to respond rather than react. This shift does not require dramatic change. It requires consistency and restraint applied quietly. One of the most overlooked elements of long-term success is margin. Margin is unused capacity, savings not spoken for, time not overcommit, energy not fully drained. Margin absorbs shocks. It allows mistakes without collapse. Without margin, even high earners remain fragile. Another quiet advantage is patience. Financial systems reward those who can wait without needing constant stimulation or validation. When decisions are made slowly, fewer errors occur. When progress is not rushed, it compounds. Patience reduces noise, and noise is often the real cost in financial life. There is also clarity. Clarity simplifies decisions and removes unnecessary complexity. When financial rules are simple and visible, behavior improves naturally. There is less reliance on motivation and more reliance on design. This is how discipline becomes automatic. Importantly, this path does not eliminate enjoyment. It removes the pressure to consume for reassurance. Pleasure becomes intentional, measured, and aligned with values rather than habits. This creates satisfaction without erosion of stability. Over time, the effects accumulate. Stress decreases. Confidence becomes internal. External comparisons lose power. Financial decisions feel less emotional and more strategic. Life becomes quieter, but stronger. This is the paradox. The most effective financial strategies do not feel aggressive. They feel almost boring. There are fewer dramatic wins, but also fewer setbacks. Progress becomes steady rather than spectacular. Most people never build this advantage because it offers no immediate reward. There is nothing to show, nothing to signal, nothing to celebrate publicly. But when conditions change, when income fluctuates, opportunities appear, or uncertainty increases, the difference becomes obvious. Those with systems, margin, and clarity adapt smoothly. Others scramble. The goal was never to have more than everyone else. The goal was to need less from circumstances to feel secure. That is the quiet advantage. This series ends here, not with a promise of wealth, but with a framework for durability. Comfort fades, income changes, markets shift, but a well-built financial structure continues to work silently in the background. And that, ultimately, is what real control looks like.